Welcome to the NOFC podcast, episode 34, with my guest, Chad Tromley. The episode name is going to be Saving Lives, Then Fueling Them Inside the Mind of a Flight Medic / Business Owner. So, Chad is currently in Dallas, Texas, and he is from the lovely state of Minnesota. We're going to talk to him about how pretty much we're going to get into your background, where you came from, what your story is, what you did before, what you're doing now, and then how you got to where you are. So you started out here based on information that we have. You started out in 2002 as an EMT, and then paramedic 2005, and you've been a flight paramedic since 2014. And what we're also going to get into is you founded your own company in 2023, Optimize FR. We're going to get into all of that, what it stands for, why you got into that, and so on and so forth. So in a brief word, Chad, just tell me a little bit about yourself, growing up in Minnesota, and how you got into it. Also says here you're a graphic designer, so I want to hear a little bit about that. And just a little bit about yourself and what got you into this field, what fueled that desire, if you don't mind. And thank you very much for being on the show, by the way.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me. Pretty simply, obviously, like you said, I got into EMS in 2002 as an EMT. Prior to that, I was a graphic designer for about 10 years. I was that art kid in school, so that was just kind of a natural progression. But what got me into the EMS side was I'm old enough to where Johnny and Roy were the cool thing, watching them flipping the caps. Ran home from school every day to watch that show. And, I had considered that career path initially, but I never went for it. And then graphic design is a weird industry where there's lots of ebbs and flows. And there was a point where it was really hard to get a job as a graphic designer. And I was like, I really need to do something different. And so I opted to just jump into an EMT class, due to, my history of wanting to do that as a kid. I was actually going to go into nursing, and then I did some ride-alongs, and I fell in love with, being a paramedic or wanting to be a paramedic. So then I jumped into paramedic school, came up in the Twin Cities area in Minnesota as a paramedic, and then made the move to Dallas. The reality is I always wanted to be a flight paramedic too, because that was the other thing I thought was really cool as a kid. I was pretty obsessed with helicopters and thought that would be a cool job option too. I had a family member who worked at the local hospital that had a flight program, and she brought me home a t-shirt with the helicopter on it. And it's like, man, that'd be really cool to be a helicopter pilot. But I was kind of a rebel without a clue as a teenager. And so joining the military was not an option at that point. And at that time, my family member had talked to some of the pilots, and they were like, yeah, if you're not a Vietnam veteran, former pilot, you're just not getting a job in this industry. And so then, kind of scrap that. So yeah, basically, got my paramedic in 2005, and the whole goal was to work towards being a flight paramedic. Obviously did that in around 2014, been a flight medic ever since.
That's awesome. I want to get into some of the stuff that you've seen and whether or not you think that's rewarding. But before I do, something that just popped into my mind as you were speaking. I think you probably dodged a big bullet in your graphic designing career, because if we look at AI now and what they're doing, that's one of the industries where, you still have the personal touch in graphic design, but AI is doing probably 90% of that. And all you have to do is type into the computer and tell it what you want.
Yeah. And I think that'll ebb and flow too, for anybody who's in that industry, because there's always the human touch. There's always the human creativity. And that goes with that ebb and flow of graphic design, where now anybody can just plug something in. But if you're not a creative person and you try to plug something in, it may
Yeah.
turn out something, but there's no art to it because,
Sure.
if you're not a creative person. So I think that that will come back around, but the creative types will just use AI to its full advantage and it'll probably just make their job easier. But that was part of the deal when I got out of it. The computers and the technology were getting so good, it took less people to do the same job. So I can
Yeah.
remember when I was doing stuff, I learned Photoshop. I think it was Photoshop like 1.5 or something like that. So like way back in the beginning.
One of the
And there
originals.
was, yeah, and there was stuff where I would like do all these special effects and I would go to lunch and I'd come back and the computer would still be processing because it was so
Yeah.
complex. And then as computers got faster, one person, you just plug in, hey, I want to do this special effect, boom, it's done, then on to the next task. And
Yeah.
so, you know, that's where the technology is kind of, taken over, where it just takes less and less people to do the same, amount of work.
Yeah. So real quick, as you're moving, your computer screen's just jolting around a little bit. So
Oh,
I don't know if
sorry.
you're hitting something. So just no, it's all
Yep.
good. So
Yep.
getting into your flight medic career, first and foremost, um, from your expectations on what you thought it was going to be compared to now being in it, what's that, 12, 13 years, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Are First of all, are you happy with it? And second, is it what you expected or hoped for?
Yes and no. I mean, the way, again, technology changes, a lot of the ground providers are doing just as much care now as we do on the flight side. The big thing, a lot of the stuff that we do now is like critical inner facilities, hospital to hospital. It's less flying into scenes and, looking like the hero,
Yeah.
picking people up off the side of the highway. And here in Dallas, and the Fort Worth area, there's trauma centers all over the place. So the helicopter is a lot less utilized for those types of calls because the ground providers, they're within driving distance of a lot of these
Yeah.
trauma centers. Um, and I miss that. I miss that part of it. Um, Part of me would love to get back on an ambulance, and I'm actually investigating that. Just picking up like a part-time gig running on the ambulance to help keep some of them skills up on that
Yeah.
side of it. Um,
Yep.
so from that end, I've learned a lot. There's a lot of nuance to critical care medicine that I do enjoy. Um, but there are times that I'm just like, man, I really miss being
Yeah.
on the ambulance, you know.
Yeah.
And then talk to your friends, or I talk to my friends that are still on the ambulance, and you still get them 2 o'clock in the morning toe pain calls, that they've had for 2 weeks. And so,
And you had to
yeah,
decide to
yeah,
call at 2 in the morning.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I don't miss that at all. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, thanks for the reminder.
Yes.
But yeah,
Put it
but
back in
yeah,
perspective.
yeah.
So then for you, Chad, so tell me what in a perfect world, I don't want to say perfect world because that's a kind of a double-edged sword. So a call that you may think is a good call could also be translated into a potential tragic event for someone else. So instead of saying that, what would be one of the calls that you would find most interesting, whether it be let's just say flight medic type call. Like what were some of those that really would you rather use more of your brain? Would you rather be more hands-on? What makes you go?
At the end of the day, I'm still a paramedic. Trauma is, you know, and going down what you were saying, I don't want to call it fun,
Right,
but
right.
I've always had the mantra that I hope you don't have to call me, but at the same time, if you need me, I want to be the one that shows up.
Good way
Um,
to put it.
so yeah, at the end of the day, a good trauma call is probably still my favorite.
Yeah.
Um,
So do you
I think
find
that's just
I want to talk about a few different ones but do you find like if you hit a trauma call, like one that it's like extremely interesting or potentially extremely traumatic, do you feel like you get into like a zone and like that is your niche and where you need to be?
yeah, definitely, definitely. I think
Yeah.
everybody's got their kind of. their lane that they like to be in. I'm
Yep.
sure it's no different than police work. It's everybody has their thing they like to do. Um, so yeah, I mean, we've got, flight personnel that love the critical care stuff. They want, 6 drips hanging. They want the patient to be super sick, or they don't want them to be, but, they want to be there when those things, go down. And I thought that was pretty cool at first, but now it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it pushes you to the limits, especially mentally, and to
Yeah.
continually deal with stuff like that. So you already shared some non interesting stories or calls. The injury toe at 2 o'clock in the morning where it's been
Yep.
hurting for 2 months. That's that is so. What about, let's flip the coin then? What are some of the ones that you've gone to, especially I'm assuming in the Dallas area? You've probably seen some significant stuff, and potentially even before that. So if you could just share 1 or 2 stories.
Um, just picking out specific stories. I don't really have any specific stories.
Okay.
The ones that, uh, actually, I take that back. There's one that there's a lot that come back, but the one that I found, really interesting is, and this was back home in Minnesota. It was shortly before I had moved here, and I was supposed to be off shift. We were coming back into the coverage area after dropping off a patient from a previous call, and we got a call for, a life alert type call, the little push button. I've fallen and I can't get up.
Yep.
And 90% of the time, they're nothing. They accidentally hit their button. Like one
Yep.
example, I remember getting one of those calls, knocking on the door, nobody answers, and we're like, is this person laying on the floor? Are they dead? Like, open the door, poke my head in, and I'm like, hello, hello. And this guy just kind of comes around the corner from his basement and looks up and he's like, how can I help you? And we're like, you got an emergency? And he's like, and I could see the life alert thing hanging around his neck. He's like, no, I'm just working in my basement. Like, well, your life alert went off. He's like, oh, sorry. And so, we just cleared that call. And
Yeah.
that's most
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
them. Most of them are, they
Yeah.
just bump it and you move
Yep.
along. And so we get this life alert call and uh, we're like, man, we're supposed to be off work.
Yep.
Hopefully it's just the run of the mill. And we pull up, and this is in small town Minnesota, because I worked, the company I worked for had multiple coverage areas, and they had a little bit of rural, they had a little bit of suburban, a little bit of urban, and this was rural. And we roll up to the scene, volunteer fire department, and they are running around outside like the Keystone Cops.
Oh.
At that point, I knew it was going to be a little bit of fun. And I get out of the truck, and one of the firefighters was like, he shot himself. He shot himself in the face. I'm like, oh,
Ooh.
God. So I'm thinking, yeah, this is just going to be a death notification. I'm going to have to call my medical director and walk into the basement. And here's this person laying on the ground, basically hugging their gun,
Yep.
eyes open, looking around. I'm like, sir, did you shoot yourself? Just nods and said, yes. That time, we were rural, so I called to see what air transport, what their ETA would be. It was too long. So we just loaded him up and drove ourselves to the hospital. And so, yeah, that was
What did that look like? Did he blow half of his face off?
no, it was a 410 buckshot.
Okay.
And
Oh,
so,
so it just
minimal
sprayed him
external
everywhere.
damage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Minimal external damage. But,
Okay.
yeah, it was a fun ride to the hospital.
I bet. I bet that was fun. So then, transitioning at some point, when does this? First of all, why does this idea of starting your own supplement slash nutritional company? come into play, and then so it's a when and a why, so it's a kind of hand in hand. Talk to me about that and how that all comes to fruition.
Uh, kind of a, I wouldn't say a long story. I'll try to make it as short as possible. So basically, growing up, I was the little skinny kid, um, and hated being the little skinny kid.
Mhm.
Um, so fast forward, graduated high school. I was probably through most of high school, I was 135 pounds, size 28 waist. Uh, get out of high school, I think I was a whole 150 pounds soaking wet. Um, and at some point, I was just like, I need to start going to the gym. I don't want to be this anymore. Um, and just, you know, a few, you know, false starts here and there, go for a little while, don't go. And then by the time I was probably about 20, 21, I started to kind of find a rhythm, got into the habit of it. So then I'm kind of OCD. And so, you know, you get the bodybuilder magazines and they're promoting all these supplements and whatnot. So,
Yep.
of course I start chasing the gains, with protein powder and all the things that they sell. And that just kind of started my, obsession with supplements. I had a cousin who worked out. He was always taking the protein powders and whatnot. And so, and at that time, those magazines were your research and you just, and being at
Yep.
that age, I was just like, I ate it up. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm going to be huge. Well, then you learn real quick that that's not how it works, unless,
FYI, same. I was the same exact way. Probably up until about that same age. Same exact, almost a carbon copy. Did you
yep.
real quick? Did you play any sports growing up? Any like competitive sports or not really?
I did through junior high, and then I was going to be a rock star after that. So through high school, I played in bands and stuff like that.
Okay,
So, and that goes
fair
back
enough.
to that being a rebel without a clue,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what started the whole working out thing too. Is I played what you would consider uh, competitive softball.
Yep.
It's kind of funny actually. It's competitive men's slow pitch softball, but it really is a culture in Minnesota. It's a weird culture. It's a bunch of, washed up athletes that, take the field and pretend that softball is life, and I fell into that for a while too. And when I started, I basically played for beer league teams. And as I started getting my, footing going, you know, getting better and better, getting back, because I loved baseball. Baseball is my sport.
Yep.
Um, I thought I was pretty okay at it. Um, but as my skills improved, I got on better and better teams. And I was never on any of the really great teams. But that was more of a networking issue on my end because, there's plenty of guys that weren't very good and ended up on the really good teams because they were good at
Of course.
networking.
Yep.
But so, yeah. And so, as I got better, you know, and playing on more competitive teams, um, that kind of drove going to the gym and improving myself from a physical standpoint to be a better ball player.
Yep.
um, and so that was kind of the catalyst as well, um, as far as getting into that stuff. And then of course back in the day, the internet started coming on because that had been in the early 90s and it was a little easier to research stuff, but it still was not easy. So you just, do whatever you could to figure out, hey, does this stuff work or does it not? And I mean, through the history of time, bro science has always been a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like everybody says, oh, you need all these research studies, but yet you've got guys that, have been, they're huge through bro science. So there is something to some of the bro science. And then, there's some that's, total trash, but I think that goes for
Yep.
anything.
Yep.
So yeah, and just as time has went on, it's been easier and easier, and especially now with AI. I mean, researching anything is
Yep.
super simple, and there's now you know AIs that are specifically for research, and
Oh, I just threw a search into ChatGPT the other day, breaking down the pros and cons of BCAAs over EAAs, and it gave me and it gave me because I didn't just ask a simple question. I said the pros and cons and what should I look for. Holy cow! Talk about going down rabbit holes.
yep,
You're absolutely right. Have AI design a little. And it'll even design a plan on not only how much to take, when to take it, like they want to ask you what your work like what are you looking to gain? Are you looking for longevity or recovery, whatever it is? And it'll break it down specifically. So you're absolutely right where they've come in just a few years, 10, 15 years.
yeah, yeah. And the problem, with AI in that respect is, some of the stuff it's pulling is bro science because it's mostly pulling
Yep.
articles versus pulling actual research studies.
Yeah,
You
data.
know,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So
Yep.
it's pulling everything it can, and it's usually from magazines and articles and influencers and all the things. Whereas you can look up some like BCAAs, and then I use an AI called Elicit, and it's strictly a research based AI, and you'll type in, I'm looking for, any research paper on BCAAs. And it will pull them all up. And then if you have any questions about it, you can, BCAAs and, muscle building, and it'll find them all. It gives you like a little, a little blurb of what the research paper is all about, so you can go, yeah, that one's useful, or no, that's not useful to what I'm trying to research. And so that's very helpful. So, and then from
So you're
there,
yeah.
oh, go
No, I
ahead.
was gonna say, so your interest starts somewhere in the vicinity of when you're playing softball, your early 20s, you really start getting into working out and putting your fitness and physical self at a higher being. When does that
Yep.
transition into you just looking into, bettering yourself to you actually getting into the science of it and that idea actually, because I think when we talked, you said you had this idea for a while. It was
Yep.
kind of stewing in there. And then at some point you just said, you know what? I'm actually going to move forward with this. So how does that transition take place from like just having to be on the back burner to you being like, all right, you know what? Enough's enough. I have to move this forward.
Yep. Um, so I guess, like, let me interject kind of the catalyst in between, because at that time it was all about muscle building, and the time that it kind of rolled more into the science of it, that really picked my interest to go beyond just trying to grow big muscles and be you know physically stronger or physically bigger. um, Living in Minnesota, obviously, wintertime is a thing. You're not outside in the sun much. um, and I had just started as a paramedic. And I just felt like crap all the time. I was working a lot of hours, working night shift specifically, and just went to the doctor and said, I feel like absolute garbage. Um, so the doc's like, yeah, let's do some labs. And then I came in for my follow up appointment. He was like, I got good news and I got bad news. I was like, well, what's the bad news? He's like, well, your vitamin D is like extremely low, like single digit low. I was like, oh, well, what's the good news? He's like, I can just give you this prescription for vitamin D. And I'm like, vitamin D prescription? So that's really a thing. The only problem there is they use the vitamin D2 as the prescription type, and
Not the
obviously vitamin
D3.
D3 is, but I can tell you that vitamin D2 does work, because it was the dosage was 50,000 IUs. So, most vitamin D is 2,000 IUs. They've actually converted over to using micrograms, but I'm old school and I don't remember what the conversion is. I always have to look it up. But it was 50,000 IUs once a week. And after the first one, it was kind of like, I don't feel any different. After the second one, it turned into like crack for me. I couldn't wait for my next dose. I felt so much better.
Really?
Um, yeah. And
Wow.
then, you know, by the time I was done, I was like, man, I'm somebody who's completely different now. Um, Felt great. And then the doc was just like, yeah, just take like 2000 IUs every day, from now on. And ever since then, I've pretty much been taking it, ever since. And that's been, God, that had probably been right around 2005 because I just became a paramedic at the time. So 20 years. And
Really?
that kind of,
Even with moving to Dallas, getting more sun, you still are taking
yeah,
it either way? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I was back home in Minnesota, I was taking 5,000 IUs. So I was taking a
Yeah.
little more.
Right.
Um, so yeah. And so then that got me down the rabbit hole of looking at it far beyond, just muscle building and whatnot.
Yep.
And then moving into, I need to be healthier. And I was getting older at the time, again, I'd been a graphic designer for 10 years. So I was coming into my 30s. It's like, I need to do better
Yep.
and, take care of my health. And so that led to that. And if catapulting that into the next, your actual question, I just always thought it would be cool that here I am obsessed with supplements and, wouldn't it be cool to be able to actually own a supplement company or work for a supplement company or, whatever. And I actually had a conversation with one of my old partners from back home that I didn't even remember the conversation at the time. But when I had started my business, she was saying, man, I remember, we were sitting around at base one day and this is something you've wanted to do for years. And that was like, oh my God, we did have that conversation. So I had
Yeah.
this conversation out in the open, you know, with, a good friend of mine that this is something I've always wanted to do.
So that
And
was in Minnesota that you had that
yep,
conversation with her?
yep, yep.
So it's been quite a few years.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's
so when did your plan of action start taking place? When do you really start pushing this then? You talk about you got your vitamin D prescription, which kind of opened your eyes a little bit more. Probably then you're probably doing some more research during after that. You get to Dallas. Is that correct?
yep, yeah. Really
Yeah.
the what took my business into motion was the pandemic. Because I had a cocktail of vitamins and stuff that I was taking for my immune system. And it was like probably 8 different things that I was taking. Uh, and I was looking at my counter and I was like, hmm, wouldn't it be great if somebody actually made a supplement that had all this stuff in it so that I
Yeah.
could just take this, take a couple pills instead of having 8 bottles sitting on my countertop. And then that's what got the ball rolling. And so I had actually started to try to figure it out. And previous to that, I had read about people starting up, supplement companies and whatnot. So I knew I could do it. And, that's kind of the cool thing of the modern, era that we're in, that a single person can start a company doing a whole lot of things now, and that
Yeah.
there's manufacturers out there that, you know, they will work with small businesses and small founders and, you know, you can jump on Alibaba and, you know, find manufacturers that, if you want to manufacture anything, you can just go on there and there's companies all over that will manufacture whatever you want. And so I started going down that rabbit hole and trying to figure out how to do all that stuff. And I was this close to pulling the trigger on doing my immune supplement, and then the vaccine came out and I just shut it down because I thought it was over at that point,
Yeah.
and obviously hindsight being 2020, uh, pun intended, um, I should have kept going because there was still a market for immune supplements for like
Sure.
2 years after that. And then talking to some people in the supplement industry, and they're like, yeah, the immune area was strong before the pandemic, and it continues on. So, but at the end of the day, I think it was a blessing in disguise because I really didn't have any direction for the business. It was just like, hey, here's my immune supplement. And, it would have been like, hey, buy this. You know, I was still in the learning phase of the whole marketing and, outreach and all that stuff. So I
Yep.
don't know that it would have, you know, worked out. Maybe I would have figured it out, while I was in the middle of it. Cause that's, running a business, you go down that rabbit hole and, I follow a lot of different entrepreneurial type influencers, and you don't know how it's going to work until you just do it. And you make a
Yep.
lot of mistakes along the way. You lose a fair amount of money along the way. You try to mitigate all that, but
Yep.
you know, the overwhelming uh word that they have is you just have to start. You know, win, lose or draw.
My
You just have to start.
my my phrase to my wife and any of my friends is nothing to it but to do it. You just you don't know.
Yeah.
People could say
Yeah.
whatever the fuck they want, and until you put your own grind in, you just don't know. So that's
Yep.
awesome. When do you finally put your foot down and be like, this is the day I'm going to start this now? Like, is there an actual like solid date, or it just kind of all blends together?
It just all kinds of blends together. I couldn't tell you what the exact date is, but from the time that I kind of shut that down, and what kind of drove that, it was at that time in my life, and it goes back to ebbs and flows. I was really starting to feel burnt out, you know, in my job, and I was like, I need to do something different, and I'd like to, be able to retire someday and retire to something I actually enjoy doing that is not what I'm doing now. Um, and so it just, I don't know, it just, from the time of shutting that down, it was probably maybe another year. And so I just took all the lessons I learned because I like legit, I was like, I had my sales rep from my supplement manufacturer call me and he's like, you ready to put in an order? And I was like, no. And that was kind of my false start. It was just like, this is real. You know, I could lose a whole bunch of money. I could fail miserably. The doubt creeps in.
Yep.
In my mind, the vaccine was going to save the day, and no one was going to buy this stuff. You know, but I learned a lot of lessons. I learned how to work with manufacturers, how to do all the things. How to set up a website, how to set up email. You know, the foundational type
Yep.
things that need to be done for a business. And so, you know, it was just a matter of, I had an email address for that business and then I was just able to change it. So I had that piece in place and, I knew how to call manufacturers and how to get quotes and all those things. And so, and that goes back to like business these days is less about, you know, the product as it is marketing to a niche,
Sure.
and having somebody
Absolutely.
to speak to. So I'm a first responder. I like my first responder brothers and sisters. I think we do a very important thing, and a lot of us don't take care of ourselves very well. And so,
That's a very true
yeah,
story.
that's kind of the rabbit hole that I started going down. It's like, I think I could help us,
Yeah.
be better, because it's just, too many people spend a lifetime in the business, then they retire, and then they're gone not long after that, or they're
Yep.
debilitated or whatever. And it's like, that's not okay. And so that's kind of my angle that I'm going towards. And that was my niche to get into, because I can speak the language, I can talk to other first responders. And so now it's
Absolutely.
just from a business end, it's about trying to build the trust with people who are willing to listen. And that's the hardest part. That's the hardest part
Yep.
I've, had. going forward. I'm not a social media person. I don't post my life on there. I've been
Yeah.
trying to force myself to get on social media more, put myself on camera. And that's kind of, was the, you know, I wanted to force myself into it and sit down and talk to you because, this is my first podcast too. And so
Yeah.
I'm trying to get myself out there. I think I have a lot of good things to say and a lot of
Absolutely.
knowledge that I've accumulated over, 30 plus years of,
Yep.
fitness and wellness and, supplements and all the things, and then the premise of the business, you know, there's a reason why a multivitamin was my first product. Why creatine was second, because to me, those are number one and two. That's, your foundation, or I call it the baseline. Um, that, there is thousands upon thousands of supplements out there with tons of claims. Some are really good, some are BS, some are very niche in terms of, if you're looking to, you know, solve something very, specific that, yeah, there's good supplements out there for that, but they're not for the vast majority of people,
Right.
and so I wanted to start a supplement business that hits the core things that, you know, I think if, more people took a multivitamin and creatine, this world would be a better place.
Absolutely. I started taking. I flirted. That's a good word. I flirted with creatine for a while, and it wasn't until it was probably past 6 months that I was on a creatine, and it was just a basic one. But even just being consistent in your daily dosage made an astronomical amount of difference in my well-being, mental clarity, and a few different other aspects of my life. I will probably never go off it again. I even got my wife on it, by the way, who
Nice.
she thinks creatine is like this monster. She thinks it's like a TRT supplement where she's going
Yeah.
to be a professional bodybuilder. It's like creatine has so many different values other than building muscle. You're not going to get that big. My wife's 120 pounds. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't worry
Well, and
about it.
that was always the, the stereotype or whatever you want to call it that,
Yep.
creatine was steroids. And it's like,
Right.
I've been taking creatine since the 90s, and I've had some off periods in there. And then I always wonder why
Right.
I ever went off of it. But, you know, I took it early on. Uh, there was a particular company, EAS.
Oh,
And they
I
were one of
remember
the,
them.
yep,
I remember.
yeah,
Yep.
Muscle Media 2000 was the magazine, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I bought into,
We probably read the same magazines and probably bought the same product from that same magazine. I can almost
yep,
guarantee it.
yep,
I can almost
EAS
guarantee it.
Phosphagen. That was the creatine. Bill Phillips was a
Yes.
master marketer.
Yep.
So yeah,
That's
so
amazing.
I started with that, and I didn't pack on 25 pounds of muscle from
Yeah.
taking, creatine, but it definitely helped the lifts. And, little
Yeah.
did I know it was helping me, cognitively and, all the things. And for your wife, you can let her know that, anytime she eats a steak or some chicken, she's, the average person
Creatine.
gets 2 to 3 grams of creatine a day just from
Yep.
the meat they consume.
Yep.
So some
We
brilliant,
just went down that rabbit hole and started figuring out that you're actually getting creatine from meats as well. And she was mind blown. She's like, I didn't know
yep.
that. Yep.
Yeah, and it was
Absolutely.
just creatine was actually like discovered in like the late 60s or early 70s, if I remember correctly. I went down that rabbit hole at some point, and I don't remember all the details, but it was just some, genius scientist guy who figured out that, creatine was in meat and it potentially could be helpful due to, how it affects ATP, and synthesized it. And so it was around long before it ever became a supplement, and they were doing, research on it. And so it's kind of interesting, how that
Yeah.
came down the pipeline.
Yeah.
But,
Absolutely.
but yeah,
So you start building some momentum. At some point, you're ready to go. What um what makes your decision? How do you make your decision on what you're going to call your company? It's optimized FR, which is, I'm assuming, for first responder, correct?
correct.
So how do you come up with that? Because I think it's a catchy name. Where
Yeah,
do you get that from?
I've always just liked the word optimization,
Mhm.
and that's kind of the goal of the company. It's like we're not selling miracle supplements. We're not, nothing that I'm selling is, I don't want to say, it's not special, but it's core supplements that you're just trying to optimize. You're trying to, I make the analogy that like a multivitamin, it's like if you own a Ferrari, you're going to put the best race gas you can in it. You're not just going to pull up to the, regular
Right.
pump and just put regular unleaded in it. And so by taking a multivitamin, you're just optimizing everything we do. The only reason humans eat is to gain nutrients. And everything starts with all the vitamins and minerals. Even, micros come before macros. A lot of people think calories, protein, carbohydrates, fats. Well, your body can't do anything with any of that without all the micronutrients. And so you're just trying to optimize your micronutrient intake to do all the things to optimize your wellness, your performance, whatever it is. And so basically I was like, okay, I want to put optimized in the name or optimize, some form of that. And I don't even know where the FR came from. I literally was just sitting around, and and it's a no brainer, you know, it's like I'm trying to serve first responders. So it's like optimized first responder sounds good, but that's just a really long name. And then,
Yeah.
if I ever wanted to carry into, I mean, you see some of these brands that, you know, they make the leap from being real niche to being mainstream, like Redcon. Redcon was very, you know, military niche. And
Yep.
then now they're in the vitamin shop. And lots of people buy it that have never even considered getting in the military. So I was just
Right.
kind
Right.
of looking for a name that just it rolled off the tongue. It sounded cool. It made a point, but wasn't, super laser focused like optimized first responder.
Yeah. All right. So then come up with the name, and you said your first product was multivitamin and creatine.
Yep.
So your multivitamin, first tell me, if you don't mind, in your opinion, your professional opinion, what makes your multivitamin different than, like, say, a Vitamin World? And then additionally, like, your creatine and how that's, what's that called? It's not, for the creatine, they wanna know the absorption rate, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, and I've got my opinions on that. So, starting with the
Okay,
multivitamin,
sure.
uh, in my opinion, most multivitamins are absolute garbage. There are some great ones out there. I was taking one prior to formulating my own, but you have to know what you're looking for. What certain vitamins and minerals are just more bioavailable than others. If you walk into your local box store and you see a bottle of vitamins that costs, $12 and it's a year supply, you get what you pay for. Uh,
Yep.
you know, and I put it up, I posted it on social media that, it's the nutrition panel from one of the big name ones that shall be nameless, that
Mm,
it has a bunch of garbage in it, like, and even potentially toxic binders and fillers in it. And it's like it's not a good multivitamin. And some of the stuff that's in it is not very bioavailable. Like a lot of cheaper multivitamins have like magnesium oxide in it. Magnesium oxide is like, I've read anywhere from 5 to 7% bioavailable. And they'll list on the label that it has 400 milligrams, which is like the daily, the RDA for magnesium. But then you do 7% of 400, you know, the number
yeah,
looks good on the label. Oh, look, it's your full daily allowance, but your body can't utilize it. So, you know, it's pretty much worthless. And so that was my goal, and again, there's nothing new in most of the, especially in multivitamins, much less the supplement world. Every now and then something new comes out and it's groundbreaking. But, I looked at some of the best multivitamins that are available and just kind of used that as a guide. And then, did some research on what are good amounts, what are good dosages of each one, you know, based on the research, and then, to amp it up a level, I added some stuff in there that's not normally in multivitamins. And some,
Like what? Like so? Like what and like why? What and why?
so pretty much all multivitamins have some sort of vitamin D in it. Most of them do not put vitamin K2 in there, which vitamin K2 is needed. They work synergistically together. D, K2, magnesium, and then like the K2 will help shuttle calcium to where it needs to go. So instead of it free floating in your blood and sticking to your arterial walls, it helps direct it into the bones. And so I put a respectable amount of D3 in there, got the K2 in there. I just have a sprinkle of magnesium because magnesium is a very large molecule, I guess, if you want to call it. So if you look at like bioavailable forms of magnesium, like magnesium glycinate, the pills are huge. You can only stuff so much into a single capsule. And I wanted to make a one a day because I take so many supplements myself that I just wanted a one capsule. And that's what I was taking before. And I take magnesium separately because I think, getting a bioavailable form of magnesium is very important. And so, and then I also added in coenzyme Q10, which helps with ATP. It's considered a provitamin. It's also an antioxidant, and it helps recycle other antioxidants. And then, like, the big thing with CoQ10 is, like, there's a lot of people that are on statins. A lot of the side effects that are caused by statins is due to a depletion of coenzyme Q10. And to go down that rabbit hole, as you age, your body produces CoQ10 on its own. And as you age, after about the age of 30, it starts declining. And then you start taking a statin, and that declines it even more. And so, like, your muscle pain and your weakness side effects from the statin are due to a deficiency in coenzyme Q10. And so, but it's also good for energy. It's part of the ATP process. And so, as you get older, supplementing with CoQ10 is a good thing. So I wanted that in there. And then beyond that, it was mostly just getting the optimal amount of nutrients in the multivitamin, for all the other vitamins and minerals.
Yeah. So then, Chad, how to? I asked you this question. I think I asked you this question. Maybe I didn't, but I'm gonna ask it. How do you figure out, or who do you talk to not only come up with all the ingredients that you deem necessary for that multivitamin, but then how do you know the correct amount of dosages to get into that pill? Like, who does all that? You have a chemist or somebody that, um, how does that work?
That's the
Dumb it down.
manufacturer. Yeah, that's 100% the
Manufacturer?
manufacturer. So, like, when I created my formulation, they were like, yeah, we don't know if we can fit that all in one pill. And so then they have to take it to their people who are biochem people. And then, I'm assuming that it's based too on who they get their raw materials from. Because, maybe, different, the manufacturers of the raw materials probably have different processes.
Sure.
And so then the manufacturers order from them, they get all that stuff in, and then they do their crazy math to figure out how much of everything needs to go in. And of course, they have all the crazy machinery that fill the pills. And bottle them up and all that stuff. And so I am completely ignorant to how
Okay.
that actually works. I've never toured my manufacturer. I am curious, and I would like to get to my manufacturer at some point to see
Yeah.
the whole process of how that exactly works and talk to those people, because that really interests me as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was more of, hey, here's my formulation. Can we do this? And they're like, stand by. Okay. And then they come back and say, well, we can do this, we can do that, but we can't do this. And
Oh, so
I
there
had to
was
make,
some tweak. You had to do some tweaking. You just had to do
yeah, there
some
was,
moving
yeah, there
around.
was,
Okay.
yep, there was some minor modifications. There was changes in, and it goes back to like saying magnesium is a very large, molecule
Yep.
that, but different forms have different sizes. So it was like, well, we can't use, like the little bit of magnesium I have in mine. I was like, well, we can't do magnesium glycinate because that's my favorite form of magnesium, but we can do magnesium citrate. It'll, we can put enough in there that it'll fit this formulation. I was like, okay, I'm good with that. Citrates,
Yeah.
you know, is pretty okay in small doses.
Yep.
So let's do it.
All right. So then you get your multivitamin all squared away, ready to go for production. Do you wait until you get a creatine, or do you already start making your multivitamin available? And then let's get into the creatine of it too.
Okay, so yeah, now I just started with the multivitamin, and I was selling for coming up on 2 years now. I was probably selling for almost a year before I went with the creatine. You
Okay.
know, and that a lot of it has to do obviously with financials and being able to
Sure.
you know fund all this stuff.
Yep.
But creatine's super simple. Creatine's just creatine. You just find a manufacturer that does creatine. There's no formulation. It's, hey, here's creatine. We throw it in a jug. Cool. We're good to go. And then at that point, it's just making sure the quality is there, finding a reputable manufacturer. And then kind of going back to what you alluded to earlier with, there's, and it goes back to hype in the marketing. Like there's all these different forms of creatine and there's patented forms of creatine and all these things. At the end of the day, all the research has been done on just plain old regular creatine monohydrate. End of story. So, you know, does it really matter? As long as it's pure and it tests out, it's going to work for those that are not non-responders.
Right.
And I have my whole theory on the whole non-responders. Either those people either use the creatine that they get from meat very efficiently, or they need a lot more. Because there is the research out there that's saying, oh, some people are just non-responders. But there's now a ton of research, a lot of biohacker type people out there that are experimenting with very large doses of creatine. And
I've
so,
heard that recently. Yeah, upwards of 20 to 25 grams a day.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And so, and there's a lot of nuance to that. I've experimented with it a little bit myself because I have access to a little extra creatine. So that's kind of a bonus. Uh, and I'm on board with it. I think I think it's legit. Um,
Do you think I have two questions. Do you think there's such thing as too much creatine? And then um I don't know when micronized monohydrate creatine came about, but I just started the micronized this most recent time I started creatine, and I found that it was much easier to stomach and it was less bloaty.
yep,
So I'm assuming that that's a thing as well.
yep, yeah, and we can talk about that first. All micronized creatine is super simple. They literally grind it up in a mesh. They just make the actual creatine smaller. Creatine is technically a salt, and so they run it through a mesh filter to break it down even more. So it takes a lot less for it to basically absorb in your gut. And that goes
Okay.
back to some of the one of the side effects from creatine is it does cause gastrointestinal distress in some people, and some people can take micronized and it doesn't mess with their gut as much. And there's still people that have tried taking monohydrate. I've got a buddy that has tried the micronized and it still makes him super bloaty and
Oh, really?
uncomfortable. And so, you know, too bad for him.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so that, you know, that's all the micronized is it's just plain old regular creatine monohydrate essentially
Just
ground up into,
filtered
yes,
more, basically, right? Yeah,
yes, made into smaller
yeah.
particles. And
Okay.
so, and I've never had a problem with creatine ever, so I don't care if it's,
Yeah,
micronized or not for me personally, but, being that micronized is an option for for the people that it does matter, I would rather, sell the micronized, which mine is.
yeah. What about, I talked about absorption rate. You had an opinion on that. What's your opinion on absorption rate for creatine, and how do they
So,
test that?
I don't have any idea how they test it, um, other than, just taking your creatine level. But, it's, I guess my opinion on that is like the different forms. It's like, plain old regular monohydrate versus, a patented version of it. And there's different forms as well. There's like creatine, HCI, there's crealine, you know, and over the years they've marketed all that different stuff, and like a lot of people who can't take the monohydrate, they do um they stomach the HCI better or the crealine, but I don't know that there's a ton of studies on that stuff. So, the jury is still essentially out on does this stuff actually work
Right.
better, and that's what it's marketed as. Oh, this is better because it's more bioavailable. And it's like, I've never seen any research on any of that to say, oh yeah, it's better, and all the research has always just been done with plain old regular creatine monohydrate, nothing fancy. So,
Yep.
and obviously it works.
Yeah.
And
And
it's one
then
of I was just going to say it's literally one of, if not the most studied supplement of all time. It's
yeah,
there's literally thousands of studies on creatine that show that it works.
yeah. So then, all right. So about a year later, that you introduced creatine, and your third, you have three, right? Right now, and you
Yep,
have the electrolyte hydration
yep.
mix. How soon after your creatine do you introduce that?
It was just I think it was just a few months after that.
Okay.
And I was, you know, it goes back to just running a business. Not everything goes
Yeah.
as planned. I really tried to get it out before summertime last year, and I didn't get it out until about midsummer. Um, and so it really kind of put a crank into how I wanted to market it and did the best I could. And that, you know, goes back to with just the problems. I sell off my own website and I sell on Amazon as well. And there's a label issue on one of my flavors. And so not able to sell that, the label has to be perfect for Amazon. I'm working on rectifying that, and my plan is to get that up on Amazon within the next month or so, so that everything is in both places. So those that prefer to shop on Amazon
Yeah.
can do so, and then people who choose to shop on my website, they can go there. Um, but
Is your
Amazon,
hydration slash electrolyte formula similar to the creatine? Is it kind of like a is it the same concept, or is there some unique value to what you're providing? Or did you add anything to yours to make it a little bit more unique?
no, I mean, electrolytes are basically electrolytes. There's a lot of different theories, and I sat there and when I was trying to come up with a formulation, seeing if there was some angle that I could, go to get cute, and have something to like, hang my hat on, you know, it, there's a lot of hydration companies now, and everybody's hit pretty much every angle that you can possibly hit now. I
Yeah.
just know that in our line of work, a hydration drink is a good thing, especially in the heat of the summer.
Yep.
Obviously, probably the vast majority of your viewers are LE. You know,
Yep.
you're wearing navy blue, you're wearing your vest, you're carrying your belt. I mean, you're gonna sweat, and you need to replace some electrolytes, when it's hot
Yeah.
out, and even sometimes in the winter,
Yep.
you're gonna get hot and sweaty, and you know, there's plenty of research on that your performance will dip even with just mild dehydration. And so,
You know,
uh,
it's very interesting that I just got into the electrolyte hydration craze, if you will, and it makes a significant difference. In your, it's for me, it makes a significant difference, and I would concur with your opinion that
you know,
replacing that the sweating out and what you're losing is important, especially as you get older.
yeah, yeah, and for sure. And even just, this is not my own personal hack, but it's one of the uh, big influencers, and he pimps one of the big name electrolyte drinks himself. It's one of his sponsors, but he recommends drinking half to one in the morning as soon as you wake up, because you spend, hopefully 8 hours sleeping. You're breathing, when you breathe, you're breathing out moisture. So you wake up mildly dehydrated. Most people, the first thing they grab is their cup of coffee or their energy drink. And then caffeine is a mild, you know, it mildly dehydrates you as well. So you're already starting off dehydrated, and then you're making yourself more dehydrated. So usually the first thing I do in the morning is I hit half a scoop to a scoop of my hydration before my coffee,
Yeah.
and there's some science behind holding off on your first coffee as well, as far as basically clearing the adenosine out of your brain and letting yourself wake up naturally, and then hitting the stimulant to really get that extra oomph, which
Yeah.
when I go to
Yeah.
work,
And then
I totally just, scrap that. I make a coffee, but I am drinking my
yeah.
electrolyte. As soon as I wake up,
Yep.
I slam that, and then I make my
Yep.
coffee, and then I'm out the door.
Yep.
Um, but so, like I said, overall, my catalog of supplements, is trying to just enhance the baseline, you know, side for people who are not supplement people. It's just like I'm trying
Yep.
to offer high quality researched products that, will move the needle in a positive direction without not getting crazy, without making any crazy claims or,
Right.
you know,
No, that's the one thing I can say about you. You've been I don't wanna say brutally honest, but you're not pulling any punches. You're being honest, and you're not claiming anything astronomical, which is something I, admire about you for sure.
yeah.
So
Well,
as a flight medic, do you guys what do you I think we talked about this. You work 24-hour shifts?
yep.
What's your schedule look like?
7A to 7A, and then it's 24/72. So we work a 24-hour shift, and then we have 3 days off.
And that's how that rotation goes?
Yep. Yeah. So it's basically an ABCD shift. It's kind of like a firefighter type
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
rotation.
Okay.
Works really well.
Um,
Works really well. I enjoy
yeah.
that schedule.
Yeah, it seems interesting because, like you said, sometimes on your off time you can get some rest, but once you're done with that shift, you have a good few days off. Now, and
Yeah.
let me ask you this though: extra shifts, overtime. I don't know how that works, but what are your guidelines? Like after you work a 24-hour shift, are you mandatory to take a certain amount of time off, or can you put in for other shifts depending on
No, you
like
can put in for other shifts. Every company is different as far
yeah,
as, how they allow that.
right,
Um, Company I work for would prefer that you not work, you know, you're not supposed to roll into a 36.
yeah,
Um, but you can work every other day as long as you want. You know, there's
yeah,
no, and I try not to, I'm like everybody else who works in this field, first responders in general. I pick up overtime. It's necessary
Yeah.
to pay the bills.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I try to pick my overtime, you know, carefully to, you know, be able to get the rest that
Strategically.
I need. Yeah, get the
Yeah.
rest that I
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
need and
Absolutely.
whatnot, because that goes back to, getting into the whole health and wellness thing, you know, and kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, about me being brutally honest and, I'm not trying to sell anybody any magic. Supplements are just that. It they're there to supplement what you're already doing. You should be trying to move the needle forward with normal things like, eating whole foods, trying to minimize ultra processed foods, drinking enough water, you know, getting exercise, doing all the things. Uh, but the reality is the most important metric that you can do is get a decent sleep schedule. There's a audiobook I listened to called Why We Sleep that will open your eyes to what sleep actually does and how important it is. I mean, the book actually scared me into how
Yeah.
much damage I've done to my body over the years of, just having that, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead mentality.
Yep.
And
There's so
so,
many of us, especially in the first responder realm, that have that
exactly.
same thought process and overwork ourselves to no end.
Yep.
So, I'm gonna, if after we're done, send me that, and I wanna
Okay.
read that. But so kind of tying everything together, three supplements. First, are you looking to include more, or are you more in the thought process of focusing on what you have now, just to optimize, pun intended, optimize your supply and what you're offering to the public?
Yeah. For right now, I'm just kind of rolling with what I've got. The long term goal is to add more supplements
Okay.
to the lineup. I have a thing that, you know, that I kind of use as a marketing tool. I call it the core four. And those four things are sleep, nutrition, exercise, and mental health. Mental health is kind of a, overreaching thing where if you take care of the first three, then, but adding in, hey, you need some downtime. Hey, you need some, to do fun things. You need to hang out with friends. You need to talk to people if you're struggling. You need to reach out. Um, those types of things. But, the mentality being that, you know, I use it as like a checklist. And it's kind of where my whole marketing thing comes from is what are you doing for each one of those things? If you can dial all them in the best you can, because obviously as first responders, we're just not going to be able to get them all dialed in all the time. It's
Yep.
impossible. And I think that goes for a lot of people just in general with our society, the way it is and how fast paced it is and whatnot. It's really hard to get all of it dialed in. But like I said, I use it as a checklist where it's like when I wake up in the morning, I'm just like, okay, what am I going to do for exercise today? Or is today, a rest day? How was my sleep? Am I going to be able to get some sleep tonight? You know, um, what am I doing for my mental health? Am I taking some downtime? If you're into meditation, and you know, for me, mental health, it's going to the gym and getting, burning
Same.
off that,
Yep.
I can't not work out anymore. I
I am the
need
same.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's me,
I think,
buddy.
yeah, yeah, we're two peas in a pod, I guess. We got the same
For
history.
work, for yeah, yep, the same influences growing up, same
Yep.
magazines. If I don't
Yep.
go to the gym, my wife says that I get in such a funk. Give me 2 days off of the gym. My wife, she'll say, "Go to the gym." I don't want to
Yep.
have anything to do. You just get funky, and for me,
Yeah.
It's that same. I like the endorphin, and like when you push yourself and you get that really good workout in, it clears everything up, and it makes you feel
Yeah.
so much better. Me, at
Yeah.
least, and
Yeah.
I
And you're
wish more
burnt.
people would have that same sensation out of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the the hard part about it is, anybody who doesn't do the exercise or has, let themselves go, um, like the advice I always give people is you got to start slow, because I've been in those periods where,
Yep.
life happens, like when my daughter was born, I didn't go to the gym for like the first 6 months, and I hated what I became. I became Fat Dad Chad. I had the dad bod. I had the big old. I don't get big all over. It's I'm that guy that I get skinnier, but my gut gets huge. And I saw a picture of
This weird.
myself. Yeah,
Same. Yep.
I saw a picture of myself, and I was like, "Oh God, I got to get back to the gym." And I got back on that horse. But you know, you're used to working out with a certain intensity, and then you try to go back and do that, and you feel like absolute garbage. So
Yep.
anybody who's like starting back up or has never started, I always recommend you got to start slow.
Baby
You there's
steps.
a
Yes.
you
Exactly.
already feel bad.
Yep.
You don't want to feel worse, because then you stop going.
Yep.
And so, start slow. Just start with some walks, do, just light weight workouts, you know, whatever it takes, whatever you enjoy. Swimming, I'm not a swimmer, but, you know,
Yep.
and then just work your way into it. Just start the intensity slow, because the idea is to feel better, not feel worse. And then you get to a level where you can go to the gym and really hit it hard, and you feel good about yourself. You walk out and you're like, man, I feel like garbage, and this
Yeah.
is great.
Yes. Exactly. And once you hit that moment, there's no feeling like that. There's no
Exactly.
feeling like that. So I'm gonna share with my viewers that you sent me a care package, and what I'm gonna do, if you're okay with it, I'm going to share with them how I feel after I take yours compared to others. Um, I'm very curious for the multivitamin because I'm on a very generic one. So I
Okay.
have a feeling that what you're going to provide is going to, I'm hoping that it makes a little bit of difference. The others, um, we'll see, but I'll change everything over and I'll try them and I'll give an honest opinion and I'll tell everybody exactly how I feel about it. It's
I
gonna
look
obviously
forward to
be a
that.
little bit. It's gonna
Yep.
be a little bit, but I'll share that. And also what I'll do is I'll share your website, your Facebook page, and tell everybody to check you out and go follow and like Chad's stuff here. You can tell by listening to him, he has a wealth of knowledge. That is without a doubt. Um, anything you want to leave our my listeners in a final word, maybe, or words of wisdom? Anything?
I think we've covered a lot of the words of wisdom,
We have.
but I guess to finish up, I look forward to your challenge. It's I love feedback.
Yeah.
I've reached out to trying to do the marketing thing, other influencers, and letting people try it.
Yep.
Whenever I ask for reviews, I've done some giveaways. Whenever I ask for reviews, I always say, try this for at least a month before you say anything,
Yep.
because I don't want anybody trying to sell this stuff. I don't want anybody putting in a review, you know, saying that, oh, hey, Chad's a nice guy. That doesn't matter. You know, I want my
Yeah.
products to make a difference. I put time into them. I put effort into them. I believe in them. I take them. They work for me. You know,
Actually that. Thank you for saying that. That was gonna. I mean, it's kind. You would think it would be an obvious answer, but I was going to ask you the question: do you take your own stuff?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay.
So, and I take a bunch of other stuff too. And
Yeah.
that's and I am a solo entrepreneur. Um, you can, if you've got questions, you can reach out to me. You can find my email address on my website. If you join my mail list, I try to send out education on a semi-regular basis. Um, Again, it's just me, so I'm kind of at the mercy of, you know, and that goes back to like social media and stuff. I have a really hard time posting on social media because I have so many other things going. So it's a matter of finding the time to put the stuff out. But
Sure.
as I keep stuff rolling, I've been finding more and more time, because more and more stuff is, at the foundation level is done. And
Yep.
so I'm able to kind of roll more into it. And so, yeah.
If you want, why don't you do this? And just in case, because sometimes when I post on social media, not the same audience doesn't always catch it. So I'll still plug not only you, individually, but your Facebook page and website. But just for our listeners or viewers that may not see it on social media and they're only on like a YouTube or Spotify, why don't you give your information where they could potentially find you if they want to purchase something from you or research you, whatever they want to do?
Okay. That's super simple. Like I said, have my website is just optimizedfr.com. The email address I kind of use for customer service is just optimizedfr@optimizedfr.com. So super simple. I wanted to make it super simple.
Yep.
And I do sell on Amazon. I was kind of getting away from Amazon, so I have really limited stock there right now. But I'm going to reinvest in Amazon because it just seems like more people like to buy supplements from Amazon,
Yeah.
and I think that goes back to the building trust. It's much
Right.
easier just to purchase on Amazon, and people are already there. They're like, hey, I need a toaster, and I might as well get some multivitamins while I'm here,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and,
Exactly. Yep.
the speed of shipping and all that. So I'm going to start leaning into both sides. So, whatever side you fall on, if you'd rather, and I don't care either way,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah,
quite
absolutely.
honest. Amazon
Yep.
takes more money, but it takes me more time because I fulfill all the orders myself. So if you order from my website, know that I am actually packaging this stuff up and sending it out and all those things. So, um, yeah. And, it goes back to, I try to offer deals. You can get a little better, through subscriptions, you can get a little better deals through my website. Like, example, if you subscribe to the multivitamin and the creatine, you save a little bit more than you would through buying it on Amazon. So,
Okay. Hey,
um,
worthwhile at least to check it out.
yep. Yeah. And that's all I ask is, check it out. That'd be fantastic. You be
Great.
the judge.
All right. Yeah. I'm going to give a review. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you spending time with me and your wealth of knowledge. It was a pleasure meeting you, and I hope our relationship will continue. I'll definitely try and stay in touch. For
That'd
all
be
of our
awesome.
viewers, thank you very much. Please check out Chad and like, follow, subscribe to here as well. We want to hear all of your feedback. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.